Good evening, and welcome to the Hero's Breath podcast. I'm your effervescent host, Matthew Huddle.
Effervescent. I like that. This is Tom Jasinski. Guys, how are you?
The recording date is Tuesday, November 27th, 2018. We're on episode 7, and tonight we are talking about the road of trials. But first...
This podcast is brought to you guys by the My Program at the Phi Center. That's Phi Center. Standing in for Primary Holistic Integrative Center, where we pretty much focus on making you the best you that you can damn well possibly be. We're really focused on optimizing brain performance, mind health, mental well-being, really approaching it from every angle, so addressing nutrition, addressing lifestyle factors like sleep, your sense of purpose, which I think is one of the main things that I hope that you and I help people get very clear on throughout the entire course of this podcast.
And that's why a partnership with the Phi Center, that's phicenter.nyc, it makes so much sense. When you and I really started all this and the idea of a sponsorship came out, it's like, it has to feel genuine.
Any partnerships, anything that we choose to promote is something that we personally have found value in, whether it's a service, whether it's a product, whether it's a book.
For each one of these episodes, in the description, any books or movies or anything we mention, so if you're curious about it and you don't have it, you can go right down to the description, click on the link, it'll take you right to the Amazon page. Now, as we talked about last week, I made the mistake originally in our overview of coupling Belly the Whale and Road of Trials together, but I'm not the only one, so that's my saving grace, and I'll give myself that excuse. One almost immediately leads into the other. It's the longest and most dynamic of all stages, and it can often repeat throughout the story, and many people who do analysis of the hero's journey, a lot of them often think that the Road of Trials pretty much encompasses the whole initiation phase, and you could think of it that way, I guess. It's really semantical. The aspects of the Road of Trials come and go, or you can think about it as like lots of little circles throughout it.
Yeah,
Tom, what's your take?
And honestly, the entire hero's journey is a road of trial. It's so hard to really pinpoint sometimes, or make very clear delineations as to what is what. Campbell's work, it's not as though every single stage
has to be there. It has to be in that order.
Precisely, right? It's a framework. It's a guide.
You realize we are analyzing an analysis.
Yeah.
This is where we get to the meat of the story.
Yeah.
This is where the hero is truly tested. As I said before in the last episode, Belly the Whales is more of an initiation, more of a hazing. You're not really being tested. It may be scary, it may be frightening, but it's not your real test as the hero. Some people have even said this is actually the point where the hero starts to climb out of the darkness, out of that negative, out of that void. I don't think it's accurate to most stories. I think that'd be like a very selective analysis. It's going to come again and again. And one of the best examples I think of this is in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Battle after fight, after running from orcs, after fighting spiders, and especially because the group ended up getting split up, that had to be represented in the story. That's oftentimes how things in life are. You might notice that things are going great for you, but every single one of your friends is in this utter shit show. This one's getting divorced, that one's car broke down, that one just got laid off, and you're like, oh, fuck me, am I next? The other thing when I was writing about this is okay, well, what's a good real life example? And I just sat there and went, well, there's 1,000 ways to die. Literally, anything goes wrong. We are very soft, delicate creatures. What isn't a trial we can face in life?
So true. Absolutely.
So there's a lot that could go on in your own life, but we don't have to go on and on and on about this. The vicissitudes of the environment, both natural and artificial, ensure that only the best creatures and the best ideas survive. It's very cold, just an affectation of existence. If there was no trials on this planet, our planet would be populated by nothing more than simple microbes. But it was the bombardment, physical rocks and radiation, the snowball Earths that came and went. It was the heated Earths that came and went. It was this constant hammering on this planet of all sorts of environmental factors that created this beautifully diverse globe that we get to enjoy and that we get to be a part of.
And that we're standing at current tail end of that. Fantastic if you think about that.
Oh, yeah.
We are the product of all of that.
All of it happened to make us. We have to consider the fact that 99.9999% of all the species that have been on this earth aren't here anymore.
We've only been around for a very short amount of time.
A very short amount of time.
With the current trajectory, I might not be around for much longer.
See, Tom and I differ in this because I am wildly, obnoxiously optimistic.
Oh, good for you. And I pray that we do wise up.
Yeah, my own perspective on life after death, the aspects of divinity, is a cobbled mess of various faiths.
It's just a quagmire there.
Nothing about inside my head makes sense. Let's just go with that. I think when it comes to realms of torment, for dissatisfactory souls. To me, nothing is closer to the truth than Naraka. Basically, Buddhist hell. Aesthetically, it's much like the hell of classical Western beliefs. It's the demons and the torment and the fire and the ice, all that shit. The difference is in Naraka, the souls that are there are in a hell of their own design, populated by demons that need to be there to purge that soul of its bad karma. The second that person realizes, I don't need to be here anymore, the demons just fade away into mist. Everything dissipates, and you go on to that judgment zone before you go on to your next life or whatever.
The reason I love that you chose that depiction is that hell is not some far-flung, distant, post-death reality.
Yeah.
That's right now.
That's what Peterson talks about.
You are currently living in your own hell, and it is entirely up to you to extract yourself from it. Things that are keeping you from moving forward, the stories you tell yourself, the lies that have been fed to you, the programming by society, family, institutions. How do you leave Naraka if not through enlightenment? What is not enlightenment if not just simply the realization of reality as it truly is and not as we have come to think it is?
To shed the perception. Again, it's that hammering. You think about, God or the gods hammering the planet to make the life that's diverse and dynamic, to make us the kind of people who could be dynamic and mentally diverse enough to survive in any environment, in any situation. The gods have to hammer us and beat the ever-living shit out of us to become stronger, better, more effectual human beings. And that's why I love what Campbell said. All the gods, all the heavens, all the hells are within you. And that was something I had to come to realize for myself, as I was alluding to in the last episode. Tom and I were joking before, this podcast was kind of turning into my therapy. Basically, once I was married and relatively acclimated into my new world, the real test started, and my alcoholism took on an insidious form. It used to be from the partying drunk. I was drinking constantly every day, just a little, and then a little more, and then a little more, and as my tolerance increased, I was drinking even more. It was a running battle for at least 5 years between my desire to live a healthy, effectual life and to numb myself enough to back into comfort. I would always lose and the alcohol would always win. Eventually got to the point where if I could show, because Lauren and I, this was one of the few things we did fight about, if I could show her that I made a 2-liter bottle of vodka last a week, I told her I was doing just fine. That didn't count the hidden bottles around the house she never found. We talked about before, the subconscious and the unconscious. So the unconscious is programming that's very, very deep, and the subconscious is under the surface, and one affects you more than the other, just depending on the situation. And some part of my subconscious knew, not far down I would argue, that I was in the wrong situation. I should not have been married to her, and I drank since I do.
So many occasions, I think, on a day-to-day where we just have this intuitive knowing that, okay, something's off.
Something's
right?
off.
Something's not right, and we ignore it.
Mm-hmm.
And we spoke about this a little bit, I think, when we were talking about the refusal of the call. And it's that refusal of the call that, that it's just going to keep knocking. And guess what? Sometimes it's going to manifest itself in some sort of dysfunction. In your case, that turned into alcoholism. For others, it might appear some sort of disease. There's a part of you that really truly understands and knows what is in fact best for you. And it's like symptoms oftentimes present themselves physically, mentally, emotionally, right? These are indicators that there is some sort of dis-ease. Hence, you break that word apart. These are all oftentimes just markers, opportunities for insight, opportunities to look within and see, okay, what is out of balance? What am I not responding to? What am I not answering?
You're making me think about the difference between modern human thinking and pagan thinking. Humans are pattern finders, and our ancestors looked at the patterns in nature and deciphered messages from the gods.
Yeah.
We consider that old hokey thinking that doesn't apply. We throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we don't look for signs within ourselves. We don't look for things in our life that are indicating that we're getting a bit off track. And as we talked about before, mocking me, which is fine. Thanks to the Mind program, I lost one of my markers. My ability to get depressed was a marker. The last couple of weeks I've been feeling this kind of odd, almost imperceptible anxiety and malaise. Something, not getting into it now, it comes into play later on down the line, but something had happened to me recently that we'll talk about in a few weeks that kind of made that feeling go away and kind of helped me get back on track. That's why we kind of laugh. It's like, oh, poor you can't get depressed anymore. Well, poor me, I lost a marker. It's like cutting off half of a compass. Because I had grown up so disconnected from raw human emotions, I was completely clueless as to what love actually was, how to find it, or what it would feel like if I really did encounter it. Now, Lauren is a wonderful person. She's still a mentor and positive effect in my life, much to her chagrin, a permanent fixture. The only thing I knew of marriage and love came from the pulpit with its narrow, dogmatic view of that. Yeah. Very utilitarian, not very warm and fuzzy. It's a biblical counsel of how to get through a marriage. Basically, how to survive until you're dead in this legal binding contract. Again, what they said and what they projected are two different things to children. You know, kids will pick up on what you don't say. And then the other side of it was Hollywood's fantasy shat onto the screen.
The way we conceptualize love has gone through so many different iterations. This thing that we've come to see love now as is fairly modern, recent.
But it always still existed, and this is why, and one of my patrons is Aphrodite. This is the first love deity that's really been there. And marriage was a utilitarian arrangement. It was to assure that everybody had a stake in the culture, in the society, to keep it moving, that they could assure their own lineage. In the heart of that, when marriage was really still, I would argue, kind of just being defined as that political and economic relationship. Here we have arguably the most powerful deity. She was made out of war, of the Titans. She became a goddess. The Olympians recognized her power and her beauty as she emerged on the ocean, but she wasn't really a goddess. She wasn't really a Titan. She was her own creation made out of conflict. And the image of that, because we literally fought a volcano in Iceland in the 70s and won. Now ask yourself this question: have I ever been able to stop myself from falling in love with anyone? Yeah. And I can tell you what the answer is. Maybe you don't act on it, but that feeling is always there, and Aphrodite has always been there, and every love goddess of every pantheon has always been there, because it's a force of nature unto itself.
Not to get hokey about it, but I honestly think at the very end of the day, that's all there is.
That's all you need.
That it's quite literally the glue that holds the universe together. I do want to make a point on marriage. I think if we can strip away utilitarian idea of it, this sort of political, institutional idea of what marriage is. This ties in beautifully also with this idea of trials. Say the monk who decides to constrict himself and commit and marry himself to a practice, a monastery. There are confines, there are certain limits imposed upon that individual. That is a spiritual path. It is within limits that one finds ultimate freedom.
I used to think that was bullshit, but it's so true now.
It's a fun paradox to play with it, because you can truly understand marriage as this spiritual path that you take. You find this other individual, and then you impose these certain, I don't like using the word constraints or limits because it has a certain perhaps negative connotation, right? It puts you in this environment, let's say, where there will be conflict, there will be ups, there will be downs. It's precisely in those moments that try you, where you will face adversity and have the opportunity to grow together, because again, you need a partner who's going to help support you, who's also going to help mirror the worst parts of you, so that way you have a way to look inward, a way to grow. Marriage in that way can be such an incredibly beautiful and horrifying, just such a trying experience.
I really wish we met and had this conversation 10 years ago. I don't have any regrets about meeting, dating, courting, marrying, impregnating, and divorcing Lauren. In that time, I was faithful provider, dutiful husband. I was doing the cooking, the cleaning, the bill paying, the oil changing, all that stuff. There's nothing to brace my fault, because the second I wasn't able to be that dutiful provider, everything fell apart very quickly. By our third wedding anniversary, the financial strain of having a child and living in New York put us to the breaking point. Massage and Pilates wasn't paying the bills, and I was no longer that provider. If I had known then what I know now, I could have changed things. I could have turned things around. I didn't have that entrepreneurial mindset back then. I washed out of those careers. I was not a socialist at that point, but I still had the old Marxist programming. Like the patterns were still operating in my head, still blame the rich for everything, the 1%, fuck them. I'm starting to love my country a little bit more. That was nice. But I still blame the world for my failures. And still espouse select feminist doctrines, which obviously did not help the marriage at all. So after going to my parents to borrow rent money for 1 month, then 2, then 3, I faced reality. I had to quit my careers, get a 9-to-5. By March of 2014, I was at a dead-end position as a clerk in a law firm. I was grateful to have a job, but commuting an hour each way every day was a lot. And I was not working towards my personal legend. I had self-published my book, which had accrued about 13 downloads, all of which were friends and family. My drinking was at its worst, and if not for my daughter, there would have been no love in the house at all. But there was plenty of anger, resentment, frustration, and blame to go around, and disgust, but none of it really saw the light of day, because we didn't really fight about that. It all stayed under the surface. It was always just there. Occasionally they'd break loose in a few noisy but pointless fights. Nothing really ever got resolved. As you said, there's this, and Dr. Peterson talked about that too. The whole point of marriage, in those ups and downs, is to work through things, to grow through things.
Right. That expectation, remain committed. I mean, it's there in the vows. So the good and bad, you have to take both.
Yeah, but those are external forces. In those vows, you don't consider the internal struggle that comes associated with those things. Needless to say, because of the external struggles, the sex had long since stopped. So one night she approached me with the idea of an open marriage, and I agreed. Most relationship therapists will use that as like the fallback plan when nothing else is working. So I'm like, well, we're broke, so fuck the relationship therapist. Let's just skip to the end because this is where they all pretty much all go. Right. Neither one of us was really pursuing another relationship yet. She ran into some guy in a couple of months. They started dating. Didn't take me very long to figure out how much happier she was with him. Not just because he wasn't me, but because he was him and she was her, and they really fit much better together. One night, I said, look, I'm bowing out. Stay with him. At that point, we just really wanted to focus on raising Fiona in a house that did not have too much resentment and hatred. We wanted her to grow up in a happy environment. To everybody out there who thinks about staying for their kids, do not fucking do that. Better to raise a kid in two homes where people actually love and tolerate each other than one home where it's like bears chained to each other's necks.
I gotta ask, would you consider Fiona potentially that saving grace, that maybe not the magical elixir quite yet, but certainly that divine intervention, the tool that has
she's anchored me to, she's anchored me to reality. Yeah.
Dude,
absolutely.
The impetus to maybe stop drinking. It was the impetus to become the better man, to be a better person.
You're jumping ahead again.
It's so big of you to actually make that conscious decision to place the ego aside, to push aside your pride. You do it for the daughter that you have, but you also did it for your wife, where you bowed out, saw her happiness, and you placed that first.
Well, she's still my friend. Yeah. She's still my best friend. I love and value her as a human being.
How many divorcees can say that?
Thank you. I do appreciate that. It was the right thing to do. And in that moment, we decided to just have like kind of verbal agreements, how we were going to handle things, see where things went with her and her new man. I went to the couch. Here I was. I had 2 careers, a book, and a marriage in the toilet. I was working a pointless dead-end job while alcoholism was thoroughly kicking my flabby ass. And while my wife was enjoying newfound love, who would later marry. It's funny how things work out. I was savoring the fruits of loneliness on the pullout. I did make a few futile attempts at coupling with another human being. 3 attempts with 2 women. Right away you can tell that the math is off. Not at once, by the way. I'm not a whore. I did try twice with the same person, which was really fucking stupid. And I will never do that again. Now, we also had a roommate, best friend from college, from massage school. And when him and I met, we connected quickly and deeply based on sci-fi and fantasy and urban exploring and dark humor and all sorts of really cool nerd-focused shit. By the time my ass was scraping the proverbial bottom, him and I hardly spoke. It's not that we were drifting apart. He's always been one of the most stable, consistent, unchanging, and honest people I've ever had the privilege of knowing. I was the one changing, not for the better. And it was really starting to get obvious to everyone. Our apartment, as I said last time, used to be the oasis. Everyone would come and hang out. Nobody came over anymore. And we had a few gatherings here and there, but that was like planned, like announced events. Nobody just came by anymore. I was turning it into a toxic stew. I was looking around at all the unpleasant changes, and there's this inescapable conclusion creeping up on me, both when I was drunk and sober. I could not drink enough to make it go away. It was stalking me like a tiger, and like a tiger, you gotta face it to keep it from eating your face off. One moment, I'm laying in the living room. I remember the moment clearly. I do not remember if I was drunk or sober because it was starting to blend together at that point. And I remember looking up at the ceiling going, I am in hell and I put myself here. I said those words out loud. And it didn't make the agony go away, but it did give me a clean karmic slate, because now I had a starting point. I'm in hell, now what? And that viewpoint of Naraka had always stuck with me since I learned it. Even when I was a faithful Christian, with a whole different set of beliefs, it always stuck with me. And in that moment, that image kept coming back to me. Then it was just a matter of, what next?
What's next?
Well, we're going to have to wait till the next podcast.
Can I give you a fun definition of hell?
I like how you put the words fun and hell together in the same fucking sentence. Congratulations, Tom.
Because we all have to go through hell in order to realize the beauty of life. I'll just say it's not mine. Hell is meeting the person you could have been.
I've heard this before. And no, it's not from Daredevil.
Not this time.
Not this time.
Hell's meeting the person you could have been. It's stuck with me. Think about all these trials that we don't want to face. All the fear that's holding us back.
And laziness.
And laziness. It's such a good practice to just picture yourself at the end of the line. You're on your deathbed. And who could you have been? What things did you not pursue? What chances did you not take? What risks?
Similar thought is, what if on our deathbed, all our alternate versions come and visit us? I'm the artist you could have been. I'm the kid you could have had. I'm the this. And it's like, that's fucking nightmarish.
I know. And that's why it encapsulates that so well.
It does.
Even tie that to Naraka. All these demons sitting in our subconscious. And mind you guys, the numbers could be slightly fudged here, but close to 95% of your day-to-day is driven by your subconscious.
Bruce Lipton, the biologist, talks about this. Yes. I think he said it was closer to 97%.
Think about that. 97%.
You're on autopilot, you're on programming.
You're thinking all the things that are preventing you from moving forward, the things that are driving certain behaviors, certain sabotage. This is going inward, and of course you're going to face trials externally as well. If we don't actually start to face those demons, and oftentimes it's on these trials, it's on the path through, when you walk through fire, that's when transformation occurs. You know, that's when you can grow and become something more.
In story, we've talked about this before, how, like, crossing a threshold. You know, if the character literally crosses a threshold, it's still just a motif. It's still just a symbolic representation of that moment of choice. The physical things, again, you know, it could represent, you know, manifest on our body as, like, a rash or, you know, impotence or whatever, that's something inside is off. It's the same thing in our lives. I really do think, you know, not to get into too much hippie woo-woo bullshit, but we can project, we can cause these things to occur to us if we're constantly in this state that encourages it. We create these monsters, we create these demons, these bad situations that come to us, and the whole time we're thinking we're being punished by something external, but we created it because we needed it, we wanted it, we had to have it, we had to have this punishment. This is my therapy. I talk about this shit with you because you're sitting here. I tell it to the audience so hopefully they can reflect off of it. You know, how many times have you already, I poured out my experience and you go, oh wait, did you see this, did you notice that? And it's like, no I didn't, thanks. At the end of my analysis of all this, there's only two questions I can really ask the audience is, are you in hell? And if you are, when will you start to get yourself out? Well, when? Why the fuck is he asking about when? Really, it's just that choice. Every soul in Naraka gets to make that choice. It's just, when are you going to?
It's in facing the fear. It's in actually acknowledging the resistance. Whenever we face resistance, that's an indicator right there.
What you resist persists.
Start to look at it, you know, because it's in actually overcoming that resistance and in going into those caves you don't want to enter, that you're actually able to face these subconscious fears, that you're able to perhaps address the trauma that was put there maybe when you were a child, or whatever the case might have been. Going back to what you were saying at the very start, this entire beautiful world of ours has been the result of constant bombardment. You evolve as an individual by putting yourself into situations that require challenge, that require you to face certain fears. Take a plunge into something.
Right away, I'm thinking about metallurgy, like you do. And one of my Pilates clients, she's Japanese, and I said, there's so much I appreciate about your culture. I said, because they take everything utilitarian and turn it into a fucking art form.
You're going a whole tangent, I'm sorry.
Just right, because, I know, like, I love Eastern shit.
I love Eastern shit, and especially Japan, and especially the way they seem to just integrate art, nature,
spirituality,
architecture.
It all comes
all
together.
their architecture is informed by these things.
Yes.
Every single discipline is informed by every other fucking discipline.
And you know what's amazing is when you say architecture, I'm going to get back to my point, but when you say architecture, God damn it, Tom, it takes a lot of engineering to make modern earthquake-resistant buildings in our Western way of thinking of being very rote and mechanical. And it's taken us how many years to do it, when the Japanese took that spiritual aspect of life and observing nature to design the balancing pagoda. It's a very spiritual act to make a katana, and it is the most scientifically advanced hunk of metal on the planet. They do not age. They will stay scalpel sharp for literally hundreds of years. You don't have to touch them. You could use them repeatedly.
So that's why you're paying tens of thousands of dollars just to.
And they're worth every goddamn cent. So when it starts, if you ever watch a video, and yes, I promise Road to Trials, we're getting back to it. If you ever watch a video of one of these masters making these damn things, he's literally sitting there with a bucket, and he's got his assistant, and he's got a bucket full of iron bits. He doesn't even have an ingot yet, and he's looking at each fucking iron nugget, examining it, and he puts it in the reject or he puts it in the good box. Then once he has that, then he forges it into an ingot. Then once he has the ingot, he's got to hammer the goddamn thing out. And there are prayers that are sent. Look, when they light the furnaces, some master workshops will have a Shinto priest there when they light the fucking furnace. So the spirit is with the fire, and the spirit of the master goes into the sword. Each sword has the master's soul and spirit into it. If we're going to take symbols out of life and apply them to our lives, I would say we should start with a katana and go from there, because that is the pinnacle of what you can make out of metal. And when the Japanese put everything into it, you yourselves, my friends, go listen to some Gary Vaynerchuck and you will understand. I think Gary's got that same kind of understanding and fire for hard work and go, and he even admits, okay, maybe sometimes I take it too far, but smash it, go, crush it, do it. And these are not just like hokey catchphrases. It's that essence of the science behind that spirit that imbues everything that we could possibly do and possibly be.
Wow.
God damn it.
Oh, it just lit a fire in me.
I want to picture some dude sitting there on his iPhone punching the air on the train.
Guys, you are each your katana.
Yes.
I think that's really the takeaway from it.
Or you can be. You have the potential to be the hero.
How do you forge a katana, dude?
Fire and water. Fire and water.
Yes.
Hammer, hammer, hammer. Fire and water. Repeat. Just like with the planet, just like with our lives.
And you purify.
You take all the slag out of it, and you constantly have to do that. Right now in my head, the little monkey playing on the iPod is playing Within Temptation Iron. You can't live without the fire. It's the heat that makes you strong. That song's great, by the way. I suggest anybody download it. Actually encapsulates this entire point, is that you have to go through these trials. You have to endure it. And Campbell talked about it. It's just going to make you better. I mean, it's so hard to enjoy it while you're going through it, but Gary Vaynerchuck's a great set of inspiration. He's like, I love getting punched in the mouth. Actually, I think that's one of his videos. Your failures will always, always, always lead to your success.
Yes, Tim Ferriss.
Oh, yeah.
One of his favorite questions is, what is a favorite failure of yours?
What's favorite failure of yours? I've given you like 30.
But see, it's so hard for me to answer that, and I'll tell you why. Maybe just from years of like conditioning myself to think in this way. It's I see no failure. And I don't think you have any either. And it's only ever a failure if it doesn't force change, if there's no growth from it. Otherwise, it's just a stepping stone. It's a learning opportunity.
I've had quite a few.
I can talk about moments where, I have experienced sabotage.
Self or external or a combination of the two?
Probably a combination of the two.
When people are sabotaged, they're never completely blindsided. Some part of them knew, and you had red flags and you ignore it.
Think about it. You asked me that question, and I actually thought about this, because every single time he asks that question to a person he's interviewing, I'm always thinking like, shit, how would I answer that? There are so many opportunities in life that flew by me. There were things that I've tried pursuing that I didn't accomplish. Then in every single one of those situations, I always look back and I'm like, well shit, if I had done that, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And then this set the stage for this and that. I'm always assessing it from that perspective.
Yeah.
One thing I think I definitely want to encourage all you guys to do is start thinking about ways to just get comfortable with the potential for that, for the failure. If you have these big fears that are preventing you from moving forward, start small. Start getting comfortable with the idea of discomfort.
Well, that's the tone you set for the last podcast, comfortable with discomfort. But that's, again, why people often conflate the two, Belly the Whale and Mother Trials, because now you're just getting uncomfortable. You're getting set into that new world. Somebody had asked me when I told them I had this podcast going, he wasn't being a dick. He was generally being pragmatic and asking, what qualifies you to try to help people out, try to give them advice? And I think the fact that you just said that, how you and I are already past so many of these stages in our development, and this isn't bragging, the last podcast I was writing and I'm like, oh fuck, I forgot subconscious and unconscious. There's so much we take for granted in this. Forgive us if we're like 13 episodes deep and we're talking about something we probably should have talked to the first or second podcast, because it's already a foregone conclusion to us.
There's been a lot of thought given into this. There's also been a lot of self-reflection for both of us in terms of our own development individually. Being honest about where we are currently, where we wish we could be, right? And seeing that in the future, but then actually taking the time to really assess, well, what has come before? Where have we gone wrong? And what are the lessons to be learned?
Sometimes you can see yourself reflected in other people
Always,
who are at different points on their journey where you have been, and you can say, okay, I've been there. The other day I was talking to somebody about the Mind program. I'm like, yeah, I'll send you the links. I've seen this person again and again and again, and they haven't called or anything else. If Tay approached me about the Mind program at a different point in my life, I would have said no.
Right.
Because I was so far down, I didn't want that help. Because I knew it could probably work. And I think she's actually at this point too. I poke the badger once in a while. I'll just remind her that it's there, that I sent you the links.
And the same is true for
you
and I, because there will be others. And it might not even be that they're ahead, but maybe that they kind of had a similar cycle within a cycle where maybe like they experienced something similar in terms of their financial that they can now kind of almost extract and see it perhaps in someone else's romantic situation, right? It's not necessarily that you and I may be ahead, it's just that in certain areas of our lives, there's certain places we've been and certain things we've experienced, and we can perhaps juxtapose that with other people. And this might sound woo, right? But like when you're ready, the right situation, the right person, the right circumstances
when the student is ready.
I'm serious though, it's so true.
Going back to Naraka, when I say that painting, I must have been like 11 or 12, maybe even younger, honestly. We're at one of the Uber minister's places. Not that he believed in it, he just liked this representation of it. I remember thinking then, well, how the hell do you realize that your karma is cleansed?
How do you
can start life?
How do you know you're in hell?
How do you know you can leave? Is this just for the Buddhists who know that this is what's going to happen and that they should know that once their karma... Is there a little timer that goes ding? I don't know if I'm 100% certain of the answer. I can tell you that it just crept on me. And I think maybe there is that kind of internal timer, the internal voice, that call to adventure. And if you think about the soul going through Naraka, it's like, okay, let's go on to the next life. Let's go on to the next adventure. Let's go on, move on from here. There's that internal call. Neil Gaiman, one of the most brilliant writers I think humanity has ever had on this planet, when he wrote the Sandman comics, one of the early issues, he was in hell. He was getting one of his items of power back after time in exile. He had this challenge with this demon to get it back. He won the challenge and he got his little item back, and the devil's like, who the fuck says I'm going to let you out? You have no power here. He says, I don't. He says, what power would hell have if the people here weren't dreaming of getting out? And the devil just said, never mind. And he just walked out. That ability to dream, that ability to want more things. I wanted a better life. As I'm laying there on my pull-out, staring at the ceiling, I had that call. I had that ambition. I had that drive, and it wasn't completely stamped out of me. Even at this time, I was still trying to think about maybe like starting a nonprofit. Like do something else if I wasn't going to do massage and Pilates. Like do something, be a help. I've always been Captain America. I always wanted to help, and if it wasn't this way, I'd try that way. That drive, that ambition, that fervor, that ardor had never left me. Plenty of acrimony, but that ardor had never left me. I wanted to do something more. I just didn't know what. And I think admitting it really did lead me to the next stage, which again we'll talk about in the next podcast. What really helped me to get out, and what helps all of us to get out, and it's gonna be a little contrary to what you might think. And I think life often manifests that way, to think a little sideways, to think differently, but to know as long as you have that internal call, as long as you're not constantly hitting the snooze button, as long as you have just that little bit of faith, why go on otherwise if everything sucks? Why do we keep ourselves alive? Jordan Peterson talks about this a lot. You want to get down to the core of it. That's my takeaway. Don't let that spark go out. You can't live without that fire.
Life is just a series of trials.
Yeah.
It is one giant road of trial, and the trajectory is upward.
Aim up.
Aim up, guys. There's so many things that might be preventing you from moving forward in your lives right now. If you're not ready to take larger plunges, if you're really in a state of fear, condition yourselves, by taking smaller steps. So by taking smaller opportunities to get comfortable with discomfort. Not that you're never going to feel the fear. It's always feeling it, doing it anyway. Personal example. I mean, it was just a weekend of suffering.
Largely self-inflicted. But I said to him, it's so weird how so many of your recent experiences sync up with what we're talking about. Here.
Funny thing is, this was planned like months ago. There was a Saturday where two other friends, the four of us, we all decided to do a Spartan race. Tay and I, we had signed up for the seminar, and they happened to fall on the same fucking weekend. Yeah. One day after the other. Middle of November, it's fucking cold out and go and run this whole obstacle course. It's a wonderful experience. And the thing is, I think a lot of people who do sign up for these obstacle course races, it's so funny, right? Because you're paying to get put through misery, crawling in mud, getting into cold water, running, and you're running and climbing shit, and you're carrying shit. It can be very miserable, but I think a lot of people are drawn to it because they also, to some extent, crave that challenge, right?
You don't grow without it.
Absolutely cannot become a stronger individual without pushing yourself, without developing that mental muscle, the discipline, the resilience. Get stronger that way. That was day one. And I had to be quick about it because that same evening I had to go out to Brooklyn for dinner, and I didn't get home until very, very late in the night, or early morning I should say. And I got maybe a total of 4 hours of sleep, and I had to be up. The seminar that we went to was being put on by Wim Hof.
Iceman Hof.
You know, this guy has broken so many records. He's swam underneath ice. He's climbed mountains just on his shorts. Incredible feats of just resilience. He has what's called the Wim Hof method. There's like breathing involved, and so we went to learn this, right? It's so much of a mental game that you play with yourself. The breathing itself has all these immune boosting benefits. There's a science, so there's a full day seminar of about 8 hours. So go into the science, they're actually showing what's going on chemically.
Your Western left brain can wrap itself around it.
But then there's a whole spiritual component as well. Dive into the meditation, and so this event culminates in the very end where we're all standing there just in swimming trunks, and we're all climbing outside all these big inflatable pools, and they're just filling them up with ice cold water and just dumping truckloads of ice. Collectively, you're suffering together, but the whole point is go past the panic. Every cell in your fucking body is just saying, get the fuck out. And you have to breathe through it. You just gotta sit there with it. And this is key, like before you get in, you're setting an intention for yourself. I'm doing this because I want to get stronger. It translates into you getting into the shower every single day, turning on the cold water, and just staying with that. It conditions you to just be more likely to want to take those risks, take those plunges, go into things, feeling the fear, but still willing to do it despite knowing that you're gonna face potential pain. I'm not saying all of you need to just go hop into a nice cold bath right now, but the idea here is to just constantly expose yourself to challenges so that way you can create that mental muscle and be more likely to take action. Oftentimes the trials we face through life are preparing us for that next step. And that's what I want to leave you guys with.
Your outro is so much fucking better than mine. Last week we had a snowstorm here. I was stuck in traffic like 2.5 hours. I just needed to do something, and I stripped down to my boxers and I went running around my neighborhood. Did a live stream on my Instagram. So then I called Tom out. I'm like, Tom, you gotta do it. You gotta do it, broski. And then he fucking dives in ice water, and all I did was text him like, you win. We are not just masochists. We are walking this road of transformation. We hope that we were able to leave you with something to take away and to understand that you can't grow without trials.
I hope this is just to motivate you to actually take that plunge. Whatever that means to you.
From Hero's Breath, this is Matt.
And Tom.
Signing off.